The Italian cruise ship Costa Concordia capsized and sank after striking an underwater obstruction off Isola del Giglio, Tuscany, on January 13, 2012, with the loss of 32 lives. The ship, carrying 4,252 people, was on the first leg of a cruise around the Mediterranean Sea, starting from Civitavecchia in Lazio, when she deviated from her planned route at the Isola del Giglio, coming closer to that island, and contacted an object on the sea floor. The contact could be heard by passengers on board and caused a temporary power blackout when water flooded the engine room. The captain, Francesco Schettino, ordered evacuation after an hour of drifting, during which the ship had started to list. Meanwhile, the harbour authorities were alerted by worried passengers, and vessels were sent to the rescue. During a 6-hour evacuation, most passengers were brought ashore. The search for missing people continued for several months, with all but 2 being accounted for. The ship was righted on September 17, 2013, and on October 24, 2013 it was reported that DNA analysis of one body found earlier in the same month confirmed it was the body of missing Italian passenger Maria Grazia Tricacchi. Costa Concordia, operated by Costa Crociere, is one of the largest ships ever to be abandoned, dominating international media in the days after the disaster. Schettino was arrested on preliminary charges of manslaughter in connection with causing a shipwreck, failing to assist 300 passengers, and failing to be the last to leave the wreck. He was later charged with failing to describe to maritime authorities the scope of the disaster and with abandoning incapacitated passengers. Costa Cruises offered compensation to passengers to pay for all damages, including the value of the cruise. 1/3 of the passengers took this offer. The company also at first offered to pay Captain Schettino's legal costs, but later changed its mind. There were immediate fears of an ecological disaster, as the partially submerged wreck was in danger of slipping into much deeper water, with a risk of oil pollution that could have devastated the popular tourist zone. In the end, no significant fuel leak occurred, and all the fuel was extracted safely from the ship by March 24, 2012. Costa Concordia has been officially declared a constructive total loss by the insurance company, with her salvage expected to be one of the biggest maritime salvage operations. On September 16, 2013, the Parbuckling salvage of the ship began. The operation started late due to bad weather, and the wreck was set upright in the early hours of September 17, 2013. In July 2014, the ship was refloated and towed to Genoa. There the ship will be dismantled and materials from the ship will be recycled. Route: Costa Concordia, with 3,206 passengers and 1,023 crew members on board, was sailing off Isola del Giglio on the night of January 13, 2012, having begun a planned 7-day cruise from Civitavecchia to Savona and 5 other ports. She struck her port side on a reef at 21:42 or 21:45 local time. The reef is charted as an area known as La Scole, about 800 meters south of the entrance to the harbour of Giglio Porto, on the island's east coast. The initial impact was at a 0.8 meters below water at the Scola Piccola 42A degree 21 a euro squared 20 a euro cubed and 10 a degree 55 a euro squared 50 a euro cubed E, the most seaward exposed rock of La Scole, which tore a 50-meter gash in the ship's port side below the water line. The impact sheared 2 long strips of steel from the ship's hull. These were later found on the seabed 92 to 96 meters from the main island. The ship has a large boulder embedded in her hull at the aft end of the impact gash. A few minutes after the impact, the head of the engine room warned the captain that the hull had an irreparable tear of 70 meters through which water entered and submerged the generators and engines. Without propulsive power and on emergency electric power, the ship shifted position only by means of inertia and the rudders, and continued north from La Scole until well past Giglio Porto. Captain Schettino has said various instruments were not functioning. Reports differ whether the ship listed to port soon after the impact and when she began listing to starboard. At 22:10, the vessel turned south. The vessel was then listing to starboard, initially by about 20 a degree, coming to rest by 22:44 at Punta del Gabionara in about 20 meters of water at an angle of hill of about 70 degrees. Captain Schettino attributes the final grounding of the ship at Punta del Gabionara to his own effort to maneuver the ship there. In contrast, on February 3, the chief of the Italian Coast Guard testified that the final grounding of the ship at Punta del Gabionara may not have been related to any attempts to maneuver the ship. Situation on the bridge, Captain Schettino stated that, before approaching the island, he turned off the alarm system for the ship's computer navigation system. I was navigating by sight, because I knew those seabeds well. I had done the move 3-4 times. He told investigators that he saw waves breaking on the reef and turned abruptly, swinging the side of the hull into the reef. I have to take responsibility for the fact that I made a judgment error. This time I ordered the turn too late. The captain initially stated that the ship was about 300 meters from the shore and hit an uncharted rock. However, the ship's first officer, Ciro Ambrosio, told investigators that Schettino had left his reading glasses in his cabin and repeatedly asked Ambrosio to check the radar for him. The captain said that Costa Cruises managers told him to perform a sail past on January 13. On August 14, 2011, the ship took a similar sail past route, but not as close to Les Scoles. The 14th August sail past was approved by Costa Cruises and was done in daylight during an island festival. The normal shipping route passes about 8 km offshore. Costa Cruises confirmed that the course taken in 2012 was not a defined, computer-programmed route for passing Giglio. In an interview with the Italian TV channel Canale 5 on July 10, 2012, Schettino stated that this was a contributing factor to the accident. In addition, at the captain's invitation, the Moore registered trademark Tagliatelle of the ship, who is from the island, was on the ship's bridge to view the island during the sail past. A further person on the bridge was a Moldovan dancer, Dominika Samorton, who testified that she was in a romantic relationship with Captain Schettino. Situation on deck, passengers were in the dining hall when there was a sudden, loud bang, which a crew member ascribed to an electrical failure. We told the guests everything was okay and under control and we tried to stop them panicking, a cabin steward recalled. The ship lost cabin electrical power shortly after the initial collision. The boat started shaking. The noisier there was panic, like in a film, dishes crashing to the floor, people running, people falling down the stairs, said a survivor. Those on board said the ship suddenly tilted to the port side. Passengers were later advised to put on their life jackets. 1/2 hour before the abandoned ship order, one crew member was videoed telling passengers at a muster station, "We have solved the problems we had and invite everyone to return to their cabins." When the ship later turned around, she began to list approximately 20 degrees to the starboard side, creating problems in launching the lifeboats. The president of Costa Cruises, Gianni Onorato, said normal lifeboat evacuation became almost impossible, because the ship listed so quickly. Maps of route. Rescue. After the grounding, passengers and crew were taken ashore from the ship by lifeboats and helicopters or swam to the island, leaving about 40 people missing. Half of these were later found inside the ship, most of them deceased. Evacuation. In the first contact, made at 22:12, between Italian port officials and the Costa Concordia after the impact on the reef, an unidentified officer on board the cruise ship insisted that she was suffering only from an electrical blackout. A passenger's video recorded at 22:20 showed panicked passengers in life jackets being told by a crew member that everything is under control, and that they should return to their cabins. No lifeboat passenger evacuation drill had taken place for the approximately 600 passengers who had just embarked. The ship's cook said that Captain Schettino ordered dinner around 22:30. Around the same time, a patrol boat of the Guardia di Finanza made a call to the Costa Concordia, but no answer came. Captain Schettino participated in 3 telephone calls with the cruise line's crisis management officer. At 22:26, Schettino told the Port of Livorno's harbour master that the ship had taken water through an opening in the port side and requested a tugboat. Port authorities were not alerted to the collision until 22:42, about an hour after the impact, and the order to evacuate the ship was not given until 22:50. Some passengers jumped into the water to swim to shore, while others, ready to evacuate the vessel, were delayed by crew members up to 45 minutes, as they resisted immediately lowering the lifeboats. Some sources report that the ship did not list until 23:15 and therefore if Chetino had given the order to abandon ship, the lifeboats could have been launched earlier, allowing the passengers to reach safety. In contrast, one expert stated that a delay might be justified considering the hazards in launching lifeboats while a ship is still moving. Staff Force Second Captain Roberto Bosio is said to have coordinated some of the deck officers in much of the evacuation. He began to evacuate the ship before Chetino's order. Many junior officers and crew members who were aware of the severity of the situation also began readying lifeboats and moving passengers from their cabins before the abandoned ship orders were given, a move that has been characterized as a mutiny. While the vast majority of the ship's multinational personnel held positions that did not require a seaman's qualifications, according to a senior shipping official, they had received mandatory training in basic safety to be able to help in situations like this. Although all of them speak at least basic English, most speak no Italian. Several passengers asserted that the crew did not help or were untrained in launching the lifeboats. This allegation was denied by the crew, one of whom stated, "The crew members, whether Filipino or Colombians or Indians, tried to the best of our ability to help passengers survive the shipwreck. Comments by some of the passengers that we were unhelpful have hurt us." A third engineer officer from the ship's engine room also pointed out that unlike the captain, we were there until the end. We did all we could to avoid catastrophe. Costa Cruises CEO Pierluigi Fui praised the crew and personnel, despite difficulties resulting from the apparent lack of direction from the ship's officers and problems in communication. 3 people reportedly drowned after jumping overboard, and another 7 were critically injured. The local fire chief said his men plucked 100 people from the water and saved around 60 others who were trapped in the boat. 5 helicopters from the Italian Coast Guard, Navy and Air Force took turns airlifting survivors still aboard and ferrying them to safety. According to investigators, Captain Chetino left the ship by around 23:30. In one telephone call from the Coast Guard to Chetino, Captain Gregorio Maria de Falco repeatedly ordered Chetino to return to the ship from his lifeboat and take charge of the ongoing passenger evacuation. At one point in the call, de Falco grew so angry at Chetino's stalling that he raised his voice and told Chetino, "Vada a bordo, cazzo." One of these calls took place at 1:46. At 1:04 an Air Force officer who was lowered aboard by helicopter reported that there were still 100 people on board. The ship's priest said he was among the last leaving the ship at around 01:30. The deputy mayor of Isola del Giglio, Mario Pellegrini, who went on board as part of the rescue operations, praised the ship's doctor and a young Costa Concordia officer, the only officer he met on board, for their help. He and the young officer, Simone Canessa, were shoulder to shoulder until 05:30. One of the missing crewmen, a waiter, was last seen helping passengers. At 3:05, 600 passengers were evacuated to the mainland by ferry. At 3:44, the Air Force officer reported that 40 to 50 people were still on board. At 4:46, the evacuation was noted as complete on the Port of Livorno's harbour master log. The next day, the survivors were transported to Porto Santo Stefano, where the first Centre for Coordination and Assistance was established. Prime Minister Mario Monti announced his intention to propose to the President of the Republic to grant the Gold Medal for Civil Valor to the common people of Isola del Giglio and Monte Argentario for their conduct during the rescue. Search for missing people. Between 14th and 30th January, rescue divers searched within the ship for missing people. The head of the Coast Guard diving team described the conditions inside the ship, still perched on a 37-meter ledge, as disastrous. Pitch-black conditions with large furniture drifting around made the rescue operation hazardous. Divers would find a path into the ship and tie down obstacles such as mattresses, before making noise to alert trapped people. The divers worked in pairs for safety and searched each assigned area slowly in a zigzag manner. The search dives were planned as 40 minutes in duration, with sufficient extra compressed air in the scuba tanks in case of emergency. The divers had 2 torches positioned on their helmets because underwater visibility varied from a few inches to about 2 feet. In addition, divers marked their route by trailing a line to be used to lead them back out in low visibility and positioned extra emergency air tanks within the ship. The divers were from the Navy, Coast Guard, and Vigili del Fuoco. On January 14, divers searched the ship until nightfall. Divers and firefighters continued to search for survivors who might have been trapped in the ship, and rescued a Korean newlywed couple trapped in a cabin 2 decks above the waterline, and the ship's purser, who had a broken leg. On January 16, violent waters shifted the ship about 1.5 centimeters, interrupting rescue work. Trapdoors were shut and debris fell on rescuers and giving rise to fear that the ship could be pushed into 68-meter deep waters or that the fuel could leak. Operations resumed about 3 hours later. Throughout the process, rescuers set off explosives to create holes in the ship's hull to reach previously inaccessible areas. On January 18, rescue efforts were suspended again when the ship shifted, but shortly afterward were resumed. On January 20, the ship began shifting by 1.5 centimeters per hour, but on January 24, Franco Gabrielli, the Italian Civil Protection Agency head, said the ship was stable. The same day divers recovered the body of the 16th victim. On January 29, the operation was suspended because the ship had shifted 3.8 centimeters in 6 hours and because of high waves. Gabrielli said, "Our first goal was to find people alive. Now we have a single, big goal, and that is that this does not translate into an environmental disaster." By the next day, operations resumed. On January 28, the 17th body, that of a female crew member, was recovered from a submerged part of the vessel. On January 31, Italy's Civil Protection Agency terminated the search in the submerged part of the ship because the deformed hull caused unacceptable safety concerns for divers. On February 22, guided by information from passengers as to where bodies might be, divers found 8 additional bodies in the wreck. A special platform was assembled to facilitate swift recovery of the bodies, 4 of which were recovered. On February 22, the recovery was suspended by inclement weather. On March 4, officials reported that they would use sophisticated robot-like equipment to find the bodies. On March 22, another 5 bodies were discovered in a remote section of the ship believed to be inside the hull. On January 15, 2013, the final 2 bodies were thought to have been located, but reportedly could not be recovered, as their location near the stern made recovery inaccessible until the ship could be rotated. However, the companies performing the refloating operation denied any bodies had been found. The search for the 2 still missing continued after the ship was uprighted on September 17, 2013. On September 26, 2013, unidentified remains were found near the central part of the ship, where they were last seen. The remains were to be subjected to DNA testing to determine their identity. On October 8, 2013, the family of missing crew member Russell Rebello was informed that a body believed to be his was found near the 3rd deck at the stern of the ship. Items on the body were reportedly subsequently identified as belonging to missing passenger Maria Grazia Tricacchi instead, and on October 24, 2013 it was reported that DNA analysis confirmed it was her body. Additional bone fragments of unknown identity were found in the wreck a few days after the body was found. On October 23, 2013, it was announced that the search for the missing while the wreck was still in the water was completed as far as technically possible. Depending on the outcome of identification analyses of remains already found, further search activities may be conducted in the wreck for the missing crew member Russell Rebello after it has been removed from the water. On 6 and 7 August 2014, divers found a human skull and bone fragments on the wreck while moored in the port of Genoa. Wreck, securing wreck site and protecting environment. authorities banned all private boats from Giglio Porto and excluded them from a 1 nautical mile non-navigation zone around the ship. Poor weather conditions could have caused a spill of oil from the ship. A floating oil barrier was put in place as a precaution. High winds on February 1 lifted the protective barrier, allowing into the surrounding waters an oily film that began spreading from the stern of the ship. The protective boom was redesigned for the weather conditions. On February 7, Civil Protection Director Franco Gabrielli told the Italian Senate that the waters were not crystal clear but are within the legal limits. Environment Minister Corrado Cloni told the Parliament of Italy that the amount of diesel fuel and lubricating oil on board Costa Concordia was about the cargo of a small oil tanker. Cloni said any oil leakage would be highly toxic for plant and animal life. In a first step to prevent pollution of the shore and assist in a refloat the ship, her oil and fuel tanks were emptied. Isola del Giglio lies within the Pelago Sanctuary for Mediterranean Marine Mammals, one of the specially protected areas of Mediterranean importance. It is a popular scuba diving destination, with tourism being its leading industry. Island residents were concerned that the wreck would be an eyesore that turned away tourists, disabling the island's economy. One resident explained, "Environmental damage is what concerns us most. If the oil pollutes the coast, we're ruined." Luigi Alcaro, head of Maritime Emergencies for Italy's Institute for Environmental Protection and Research, an agency of the Ministry of the Environment, stated that in a worst case, we could be talking years and dozens of millions of euros. EMSA contracted standby oil spill response vessel Salina Bay arrived at the site of Costa Concordia on January 28 and will remain on station as a precautionary measure during the fuel removal operation. ISPRA's oceanographic ship Astrea arrived in Tuscany on January 29 to conduct environmental investigations. On February 9, the CEO of Costa Cruises told residents of Giglio the company would have by mid-March the plan to remove the ship. He also promised to minimize harm to their tourism businesses. The wreck came to rest on a rock ledge and there were concerns that she might slide into deeper water. The stability and deformation of the ship was monitored by satellite imagery and surface-based instruments. Although the ship was not in immediate risk of slipping from its grounded position into deeper water, Environment Minister Cloni told the Italian Senate on February 8 that the risk for a collapse is quite real. The more time passes, the weaker the hull becomes. We cannot guarantee that it has not been compromised already. On January 29, 2012, scientists had become very concerned that the ship had moved 3.5 centimeters over 6 hours that day. On February 2, the ship shifted 8 centimeters during 7 hours. Shifts and any high winds and high seas caused suspension of recovery and salvage operations. On February 16, Civil Protection Director Gabrielli confirmed that the data registered is absent of anomalies. Another report based on sonar and laser measurements, and an ISPRA underwater video, indicated that the ship might collapse in its midsection because its weight was not supported between the rock spur supporting the bow and the rock spur supporting the stern, and said at the time that both of those rocks had now started crumbling dramatically. Civil Protection Director Gabrielli stated that report was reassuring in that it shows that a part of the seabed has got into the hull, basically increasing the ship's stability. It was also found that the hull was slowly collapsing under its own weight, making salvage more difficult and expensive. Salvage, all operations planned for the wreck, including defueling, were conducted jointly by Costa Cruises and the Concordia Emergency Commissioner's Office. On February 12, 2012, after weeks of weather delays, Dutch salvage firm Smit International, acting jointly with Italian company NER Spar, started removing the vessel's 2,380 tons of heavy fuel oil. The 15 tanks that contained about 84% of the fuel in the vessel were emptied first and expected to take about 28 days. The second phase involved the engine room, which had nearly 350 cubic meters of diesel, fuel and other lubricants. The offloading process required fixing valves to the underwater fuel tanks, one on top, one on the bottom. Hoses were then attached to the valves and as the oil, warmed to make it less viscous, was pumped out of the upper hose and into a nearby ship, replacing it with seawater pumped in through the lower hose to fill the space, so as not to affect the ship's balance, a technique known as hot tapping. By February 20, 2012, the tanks in the forward part of the ship, which had held about two-thirds of the fuel, had been emptied, but the following day defueling was suspended because of poor weather conditions. On March 3, 2012, salvage workers cut a hole in the ship for access to the engine room, the location of the remaining fuel. On the morning of March 12, defueling operations resumed and were completed on March 24. With defueling complete, removal of the wreck began. On February 3, Franco Gabrielli, the head of the Civil Protection Authority, told a meeting of residents of Giglio that the ship would be refloated and removed whole, and not cut up for scrap on site. The CEO of Costa stated that after the breaches in the hull were sealed, the ship could be refloated, with difficulty, by giant inflatable buoys and then towed away. The company invited 10 firms to bid for the contract to salvage the ship. 6 bids were submitted in early March and the proposed removal plans were assessed jointly with the Civil Protection Scientific Committee. The salvage operation was expected to commence in the middle of May. The operation, one of the largest ever ventured, was predicted to take from 7 to 10 months, depending on weather and sea conditions. By April 12, 2012, Costa Concordia had 2 consortia in mind, SMIT and NERI, or Titan Salvage and Mikko Peri. On April 21, it was announced that Florida-based marine salvage and wreck removal company Titan, with its partner company Mikko Peri, an Italian firm specializing in undersea engineering solutions, had been awarded the contract to refloat and tow Costa Concordia to a port on the Italian mainland. The salvage operation, using the port of Civitavecchia as its base, was anticipated to begin in early May, take about 12 months and cost $300 million. Once in port, the ship would be dismantled and the materials sold as scrap. South African freelance Nick Sloan was appointed as salvage master to lead the operation. The Parbuckling. Preparatory work consisted of building an underwater metal platform and artificial seabed made of sand and cement on the downhill side of the wreck and welding sponsons to the side of the ship above the surface. Once this was completed, the ship was pulled upright by cables over the course of 2 days and settled on the platform, a method called parbuckling. Additional sponsons would then be attached to the other side of the ship. Both sets would be flushed of water and their buoyancy would refloat the ship to allow her to be towed away, probably for demolition. In June 2012, the barge was put in place, and the removal of her radar, water slide and funnel began before stabilization of the ship to prevent further slippage down the sloped seabed. Concordia's funnel was cut off in December, and the salvage companies were in the process of building the underwater support structure by mid-January 2013. On September 16, 2013, the parbuckling of the ship began. The operation to right the ship and free her from the rocks began on September 16, 2013, but started late due to bad weather. Once the ship had been rotated slightly past a critical angle of 24 degrees from its resting position, valves on the sponsons were opened to allow seawater to flood into them, and the increasing weight of the water in the sponsons completed the rolling of the ship to the upright position at an accelerated pace, without further need of the strand jacks and cables. The ship was returned to a fully upright position in the early hours of September 17, 2013, shortly before 3 a.m. CET. As of September 16, 2013, the salvage operation had cost over $600 million. Images of righting of Costa Concordia. Refloating and removal. Following the conclusion of the righting operation, the ship was kept on a platform while further inspections were made and a starboard sponsons attached. On October 10, 2013, a $30 million option was taken with Dockwise for the use of the world's largest semi-submersible heavy-lift vessel, Dockwise Vanguard, to transport Costa Concordia, as an alternative to conventional towing. In December 2013, invitations were issued by Costa to 12 companies to tender for the dismantling of Costa Concordia, in France, Italy, Norway, Turkey and the UK. On June 30, 2014, the Italian government endorsed Costa's decision to have the vessel dismantled at Genoa by Italian companies Sapem, Moyotti and San Giorgio. On February 1, 2014, a Spanish diver working on the Costa Concordia wreck died after slashing his leg on a sheet of metal. He was brought to the surface alive by a fellow diver, but later died. The name of the deceased has not been released by authorities. This was the only death to occur during the Costa Concordia's salvage operation. On July 14, 2014, salvage operators refloated Costa Concordia off its submerged platform and towed the ship laterally a short distance away from the coast. As of July 20, 2014, the ship had refloated 7.5 meters from its supporting platform, with 6.3 meters remaining. On July 23, 2014, the Costa Concordia began her final journey to the port of Genoa. On July 27, 2014, the Costa Concordia arrived in Genoa where she was moored against a wharf that had been specially prepared to receive the vessel for deconstruction. Loss and compensation, passengers and personnel. By nationality, the passengers included 989 Italians, 569 Germans, 462 French, 177 Spanish, 126 129 Americans, 127 Croats, and 108 Russians. The remaining 520 passengers included 74 Austrians, 69 Swiss, 47 Brazilians, 45 Ukrainians, and 42 Dutch. 34 were Koreans, 26 were Hong Kong citizens, 25 British citizens, 21 Australians, 17 18 Argentines, 13 Taiwanese, 12 Canadians, 12 Chinese citizens, 12 Poles, 11 Hungarians, 11 Portuguese, 11 Dominicans, 10 Romanians, 10 Colombians, 10 Chileans, 9 Turks, 8 Bulgarians, 8 Peruvians, 6 Belgians, 5 Swedes, 4 Israelis, 4 Danes, 3 Irish, 3 Macedonians, 2 Mexicans, 2 South Africans, 2 Paraguayans, 2 Finns, 1 Indian, 1 Lithuanian and 1 New Zealander. The nationalities of all crew aboard have not been enumerated, but it consisted of citizens of 20 to 40 countries. Some are Italians, but 202 Indians and 296 Filipinos made up approximately half of the personnel. Other nationalities include 170 Indonesians, 12 British nationals, 6 Brazilians, 3 Russians, and an unspecified number of Colombian, Peruvian, Spanish, Honduran and Chinese. 31 people are known to have died, and 64 others were injured. 3 people trapped inside the ship were rescued more than 24 hours after the accident. One missing person, Indian crew member Russell Rebello, is still unaccounted for and presumed dead. On January 27, Costa posted on its website the compensation package offered to uninjured passengers. The compensation comprises a payment of $11,000 per person to compensate for all damages and reimbursement for a range of other costs and losses, including reimbursement for the value of the cruise, for all air and bus travel costs included in the cruise package, for all travel expenses to return home, for all medical expenses arising from the event, and for all expenses incurred on board during the cruise. Costa also promised return of all property stored in cabin safes, to the extent recoverable, and to grant passengers access to a program for psychological assistance. Costa stated that it would not set off from these payments any amount an insurance policy pays to the passenger. The offer to uninjured passengers was effective until March 31. As to the families of the dead and missing, separate proposals were to be offered based on their individual circumstances. Costa for a time permitted its customers to cancel without penalty certain future cruises. 1/3 of the passengers have acquiesced to the $11,000 compensation. The trade union representing the crew has negotiated compensation packages. Crew members will be paid wages for a minimum of 2 months or, if longer, their full contract term. They are also to receive reimbursement for expenses and up to £2,250 for lost personal property. As well as compensation, survivors of the Concordia disaster have called for safety improvements to be made. From the evidence available, including expert evidence obtained during the criminal proceedings in Italy, it is clear that the initial grounding of Costa Concordia should have been avoided and that subsequent failings in carrying out the evacuation process made a very bad situation far worse. On February 23, 2012, the Environment Ministry announced it would be taking legal action against Costa Cruises regarding a possible claim for possible environmental damage, and the cost of salvage. Ship industry experts believe the ship is a constructive total loss, with damages of at least $500 million. Pierluigi Fui, CEO of Costa, has told a Senate committee hearing that we believe that the wreck can no longer be put in use. Shares in the Carnival Corporation, the American company that jointly with Carnival plc owns Costa Cruises, initially fell by 18% on January 16, 2012 following a statement by the group that the sinking of the ship could cost Carnival Corporation up to $95 million. Carnival Corporation later increased the estimated financial impact in fiscal year 2012 to include a reduction in net income of $85 million to $95 million, an estimated insurance excess of an additional $40 million, and €40 million in other incident-related costs. The insurance excess on the vessel was $30 million. The group of cruise lines jointly owned by Carnival Corporation and Carnival plc comprises 49% of the worldwide cruise ship industry and owns 101 ships, of which Costa Concordia represents 1.5% of capacity. Booking volume for Carnival's fleet, excluding Costa, in the 12 post-accident days was down by the mid-teens as a percentage of year-earlier bookings. Investigations. The Italian Marine Casualty Investigation Central Board, a unit of the core of the port captaincy's Coast Guard, conducts the technical investigations of maritime accidents and incidents within Italian-controlled waters. On February 6, the International Chamber of Shipping, representing ship owners' associations, called for the earliest possible publication of the Italian accident investigations. International experts have said that it is too early to speculate on why the vessel capsized despite its watertight compartments, but that the size of the vessel is unlikely to have been an issue. Tuscany's Prosecutor General has said that the investigation will seek to find causes for various aspects of the event, and beyond Captain Schettino to other persons and companies. By January 2013 the technical investigation report had not yet been released. Lloyd's List said that the Casualty Investigation Board roundly received criticism for not having released the investigation yet. The board said that the investigation was delayed because the Italian prosecuting team had seized important information, including the voyage recorder. Judge Valeria Montesacchio summoned survivors to testify at a hearing to be convened on March 3 in Grosseto. The European Maritime Safety Agency is the EU agency tasked to develop a common methodology for investigating maritime accidents. The captain tested negative for drug and alcohol use, but one group that is suing Costa Cruises and that leaked the test results, disputed the tests as unreliable. On February 24, 2012, prosecutors alleged that Schettino slowed down the ship so that he could finish dinner in peace, and to compensate for lost time, subsequently increased the speed to 16 knots just before the sail passed. In addition, on February 2, 2012 the prosecutor's office in Paris, France, opened a preliminary inquiry to question survivors to establish any criminal liability and assess psychological damage. Criminal proceedings against officers, Captain Schettino, who had worked for Costa Cruises for 11 years, and First Officer Ciro Ambrosio were arrested. The captain was detained on suspicion of manslaughter and for violations of the Italian Penal Code and Code of Navigation on 3 specifications, of his having caused the shipwreck owing to imprudence, negligence and incompetence resulting in deaths. Having abandoned about 300 people unable to fend for themselves. And not having been the last to leave a shipwreck. They were questioned on January 14. At the validation hearing of January 17, 2012, the Court of Grosseto charged Schettino and Ambrosio with the results from the records of investigation compiled immediately after the event, including the first report of the Coast Guard of Porto Santo Stefano of January 14, 2012, the summary testimonial information given by the members of the ship's crew, the chronology of events of the Harbour Office of the Port of Livorno, the AIS recording on record, and the PG annotation of the Harbour Office of the Port of Livorno. Schettino was released from jail on January 17 but was placed under house arrest. The house arrest order included an absolute prohibition against going away or communicating by any means with persons other than his cohabitants. On February 7, the court decided to continue Schettino's house arrest. On February 23, 2 additional charges, of abandoning incapacitated passengers and failing to inform maritime authorities, were levied against Captain Schettino. His pre-trial hearing was scheduled for March 20. On July 5, 2012, Schettino was released from house arrest but mandated to reside in Meta di Sorrento. Officials were initially trying to determine why the ship did not issue a mayday and why she was navigating so close to the coast. The delay in the evacuation request was also unexplained. On February 11, TG5 broadcast a video of the commotion on the bridge following the collision. In the video, when one officer said, "Passengers are getting into the lifeboats," Schettino responded, "Vabua squared." The magistrate in charge of the inquiry remarked, "This is new to you, so I've just seen it for the first time." On February 19, the Associated Press reported that traces of cocaine had been found on Schettino's hair samples, but not within the hair strands or in his urine, which would have indicated he had used the drug. On February 22, 2012, 4 officers who were on board and 3 managers of Costa Cruises were placed formally under investigation, and faced charges of manslaughter, causing a shipwreck and failing to communicate with maritime authorities. Recorded evidence: one of the ship's voyage data recorders, which was designed to float, was recovered. Another containing different data was located on January 17. A third is in a submerged part of the ship difficult to reach. On January 19, 2012, all the data storage devices from the ship's control panel, including hard disks, were recovered. One of the hard disks contained videos from cameras located near the control board, which are expected to reveal the movements of the ship's captain and officers. The chief prosecutor received from the Guardia di Finanza a video, taken from their patrol boat, that filmed the ship between 22:30 and 23:10 or at 23:20. On March 3, 2012, in Grosseto, judges began a hearing open to all survivors, other injured parties, and their lawyers but closed to the general public and media. 4 specialists were ordered to review the VDR data and relate their conclusions at a July 21, 2012 hearing. Prosecutor Francesco Viuzio had stated that it could take a month, 2 months, 3 months for evidence analysis, including of recorded conversations on the bridge, to be completed. The hearing also determined who could attach lawsuits to the case. Inhabitants of Giglio and some environmental groups were denied this ability. Trials: on July 20, 2013, 5 people were found guilty of manslaughter, negligence and shipwreck. Roberto Ferrarini received the longest sentence at 2 years 10 months, followed by Mainrico Giampedrini at 2.5 years. 3 crew members First Officer Ciro Ambrosio, helmsman Jacob Rusley-Bin and 3rd Officer Silvia Coronica were given sentences between 1 and 2 years. Ferrarini, who was not on the ship, was convicted of minimizing the extent of the disaster and delaying an adequate response. Giampedrini, the hotel director, was convicted for his role in the evacuation, which was described as chaotic. The helmsman Bin was convicted for steering the ship in the wrong direction after Schettino ordered a corrective maneuver. Reuters cited judicial sources as saying none of these individuals are likely to go to jail as sentences less than 2 years for non-violent offences are routinely suspended in Italy, and longer sentences may be appealed or replaced by community service. Lawyers for the victims decried the sentences as shameful and said they might appeal to overturn the plea bargains that allowed reduced sentences in return for guilty pleas. The company Costa Cruises avoided a trial in April by agreeing to a $1 million fine, but victims are pursuing damages in a civil case. In a separate trial for manslaughter and causing the loss of the ship, Captain Francesco Schettino has been seeking a plea bargain agreement. However, when his trial resumed in October 2013, the Moldavian dancer Dominica Samorton, 26, admitted being his lover and being on the ship without a ticket, after the prosecution alleged that her presence on the bridge generated confusion and distraction for the captain. The helmsman Jacob Rusley-Bin failed to turn up in March 2014 to give evidence and was thought to be somewhere in Indonesia. Roberto Ferrarini told the court in April that Schettino asked me to tell the maritime authorities that the collision was down to a blackout on the ship. But I strongly objected. Passengers told the court in May that if they had followed the officer's orders to return to their cabins, they would have been drowned. Reactions: Costa Cruises and its parent companies. Costa Crociere S.p.A. also does business using the name Costa Cruises. Costa Cruises is jointly owned by a dual-listed company comprising the two separate companies Carnival Corporation and Carnival plc. Carnival Corporation announced on January 30, 2012 that its board of directors will engage outside consultants in various disciplines, including emergency response, organization, training and implementation, to conduct a comprehensive review of the accident and the company's procedures. Costa Cruises at first offered to pay Captain Schettino's legal costs but decided later that they would not do so. Regulatory and industry response: Corrado Cloni, Italy's Minister of Environment, said that saluting, a custom that has resulted in an outcome visible to all, should no longer be tolerated. On January 23, 2012, UNESCO asked Italy to reroute cruise ships to avoid sailing too close to culturally and ecologically important areas, and on March 1, Italy excluded large ships from sailing closer than 2 miles from marine parks. The European Maritime Safety Agency was in the process of conducting a review of maritime safety when the accident occurred. On January 24, 2012, Transport Commissioner Siam Collas told the Transportation Committee of the European Parliament that lessons learned from the loss of Costa Concordia would be taken into account. British MEP Jacqueline Foster warned against trial by television and trial by the newspapers, a view that was backed by fellow British MEP Brian Simpson, who said that it was good practice to wait for the official report. On January 18, 2012, the chairman of the United States House Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure announced that it would hold a hearing, conducted jointly with the committee's Maritime Transportation Subcommittee, to review the events of this specific incident, current safety measures and training requirements. Testimony and statements at February 29 hearing primarily promoted North American cruise ships as being safe. Gianni Cerni, the chairman of Registro Italiano Navale, the classification society that issued Costa Concordia a certificate of seaworthiness and safety management in November 2011, resigned on January 18, 2012. The Cruise Lines International Association, the European Cruise Council and the Passenger Shipping Association adopted a new policy requiring all embarking passengers to participate in muster drills before departure. On January 29, 2012, at Fort Lauderdale, Florida, Holland America Line made one passenger disembark from the cruise ship MSA Westerdam for non-compliance during a mandatory muster drill. On April 24, the CLIA and the ECC introduced new policies. Bridge officers must agree on the route before departing. Ships must carry more life jackets. And access to the bridge must be limited. In an action some parliamentarians said was a reaction to the wrecking of Costa Concordia, the Italian government withdrew proposed legislation that would have reduced current restrictions on mineral exploration and production. On July 8, 2012, CNN reported that the disaster brought changes to safety and evacuation procedures in the cruise industry. Carnival, the parent line of Costa, and several other cruise lines now require safety instruction, referred to as muster drills, before leaving port. The new muster policy consists of 12 specific emergency instructions, which include providing information on when and how to don a life jacket, where to muster and what to expect if there is an evacuation of the ship. Media coverage of the shipwreck dominated international media in the days after the disaster. The New York Times called the incident a drama that seemed to blend tragedy with elements of farce. Philip Knightley called it the most significant event in modern maritime history, because every single safety procedure designed to make sea travel safe failed miserably. UK's Channel 4 television commissioned and broadcast 2 programmes about the disaster. Terror at Sea, The Sinking of the Costa Concordia, broadcast on January 31, 2012, explored how and why the ship went down. The Sinking of the Concordia, Caught on Camera, broadcast on April 11, 2012, provided a minute-by-minute anatomy of the Costa Concordia disaster, made almost entirely from passengers' mobile phone and video camera footage. The documentary also featured thermal imaging footage of the stricken ship taken by the rescue helicopter, together with pilot commentary, and a recording of the conversation between the Coast Guard and the captain, during which the Coast Guard ordered Captain Chetino to return to his ship. In 2014, the Smithsonian Channel broadcast Cruise Ship Down, Saving Concordia, detailing the efforts to right the Costa Concordia before she collapsed under her own weight. In Italy, Corriere della Sera stated that Italy owed the world a convincing explanation for the wreck and called for harsh punishment of those found responsible. Il Giornale said the wreck was a global disaster for Italy. Il Messaggero said there was anguish over those still missing. La Repubblica called the event a night of errors and lies. La Stampa criticized the captain for not raising the alarm and refusing to go back on board the ship. Italian commentators reflected on the contrast between Chetino and De Falco and what it said about the national character. They represented the two souls of Italy, according to Aldo Grasso and Corriere della Sera. On the one hand, a man hopelessly lost, a coward who shirks his responsibility as a man and an officer, indelibly stained. The other grasps the seriousness of the situation immediately and tries to remind the first of his obligations. Some saw parallels between the incident and the country's recent political upheavals. To see someone that in a moment of difficulty maintains steady nerves is consoling because that is what we need, another Corriere della Sera columnist, Beppe Savini, told the New York Times. Italy wants to have steady nerves because we've already done the cabaret route. De Falco's exasperated order to Chetino, "Vada a bordo, cazzo," became a catchphrase in Italy. T-shirts with the phrase were soon printed and sold across the country. It has also been used on Twitter and Facebook. Honours and Memorial. In September 2012, Lloyd's of London awarded the title of Seafarers of the Year, recognising the best professional sailing and ship to the Costa Concordia crew for their exemplary behaviour during the shipwreck, which has saved most of the ship's passengers. In January 2013, the municipalities of Isola del Giglio and Monte Argentario have been decorated with the highest Italian civil award, the Gold Medal of Civil Merit, granted by the President of the Republic for the commitment of citizens, administrators and local institutions in the rescue of the survivors of the ship Costa Concordia. The Mayor of Giglio, Sergio Ortoli, and Costa Cruises are in agreement that the large boulder to be removed from the side of the vessel should be suitably positioned on the island as a memorial to the 32 people who lost their lives. Ortoli anticipates the boulder will most likely be positioned close to the harbour entrance so that visitors and locals can see her clearly and pay their respects to the victims. What happened that night is something Giglio will never forget, and the rock will be a fitting memorial. The cost of removing the 80-ton boulder is estimated at £40,000. On January 13, 2013, a rock was cast into the sea at the site of the disaster with a plaque to commemorate those lost. Safety regulations. Like all passenger ships, Costa Concordia was subject to 2 major International Maritime Organization requirements: to perform musters of the passengers within 24 hours after their embarkation, and to be able to launch survival craft sufficient for the total number of persons aboard. Within a period of 30 minutes from the time the abandoned ship signal is given. Passenger ships must be equipped with lifeboats for 125% of the ship's passenger and crew maximum capacity, among which at least 37% of that capacity must consist of hard lifeboats as opposed to inflatable ones. Launching systems must enable the lowering of the lifeboats under 20 a degree of list and 10 a degree of pitch. According to Costa Cruises, its internal regulations require all crew members to complete basic safety training, and to perform a ship evacuation drill every 2 weeks. Every week, All the lifeboats on one side of the ship are launched for a test. Under the regulations in force in 2006 when Costa Concordia was delivered, the ship had to be designed to survive the flooding of two adjacent compartments caused by an 11-meter breach. The damage caused by impact with the rocks left a 36.5-meter tear in the hull. Timeline of wrecking. Below is a timeline of the wrecking, 13 January 14, 2012. See also, List of shipwrecks, List of maritime disasters, Carnival Triumph, Miss Sea Diamond, Notes. References. External links, Miss Costa Concordia disaster a survivor's story and photos, www.theparbucklingproject.com The Parbuckling Project, Costa Concordia wreck removal project site, Costa Concordia update from Costa Cruises, statement regarding Costa Concordia from Carnival Corporation and plc, January 14, 2012, Francesco Schettino news blog, news and information on the Costa Concordia and its captain Francesco Schettino, timeline of events from BBC News, ZAR 1/4 Zeitung, and TGCOM24 slideshow and underwater photos, and from TGCOM24 transcript of telephone call between captain and Coast Guard. Reconstruction of the route from radar AIS data by Quality Positioning Services BV, list of dead, missing from the Costa Concordia cruise ship that grounded off Italy. Associated Press. February 22, 2012. Archived from the original on February 22, 2012. Retrieved February 22, 2012. Costa Concordia, salvaging a shipwreck, Costa Concordia, salvaging a shipwreck. CBC News. A World Askew, on board the Costa Concordia, a brief 60 minutes overtime blurb or correspondent candids, of 329 inches length is also available at A World Askew, on board the Costa Concordia 60 minutes overtime staff visit the Costa Concordia video report. Interrogation transcript of CPT. Francesco Schettino by the investigating judge and prosecutors, 1, 2, 3, 4, Rear Admiral Francesco Carpentieri. Admiral Giuseppe Kevo Dragone. Professor Enzo Dalmes. Professor Mario Maestro. Technical report on the sinking of the Costa Concordia. Grossatoa, transcript of conversations on the bridge as recorded by the VDR, initial announcement, passengers evacuating, infrared aerial video of evacuation, daytime aerial video, rescuers on top deck. Views inside ship, court here's how 32 died in Italy shipwreck, Yahoo! News, July 17, 2013. Photo gallery and time-lapse video showing the lifting of the ship into upright position.